The Big Issue. Breaking down the issues that matter.
Hello everyone, welcome to Leadership Podcast. It's another edition of The Big Issue. And of course, as usual, I am your regular host. George Jagba is my name. And our in-house analysts are here with me in the studio. We have Sunday Isua.
Nice to be here.
And Adebi Adedapo. Well, the big issue for the day is the moves by President Muhammadu Buhari to reverse changes made by the National Assembly in the 2022 budget. The president made real his vow to remove some of the items inserted in the 2022 budget by members of the National Assembly. To this effect, the Federal Executive Council on Wednesday presented a second memo which has to do with the request for approval of the 2022 appropriation amendment. Minister of Finance, Hajia Zainab, hinted that the second memo presented to FEC has to do with request made to amend the 2022 appropriation bill in order to remove some of those items that the president protested against while signing the 2022 budget. Well, it's what last time we were here to discuss this matter that the president was not happy and he was grumbling seriously while he was signing the 2022 appropriation bill that the National Assembly inserted about over 6,000 items which were not originally included in the budget, in the bill by the executive. Now that the amendment will be going to the National Assembly, what are we expecting? Will the lawmakers actually reverse themselves by allowing what the president has sent as amendment to the appropriation bill to scale through? Because in the first place, some of those changes made were the National Assembly members themselves. They were made by the National Assembly members themselves. Now that the president is sending an amendment to remove some of these insertions, what do you think?
No, I think President Muhammadu Buhari is just trying to tell Nigerians that with or without budget, he can be able to rule the country. Because I see no reason why the National Assembly have passed a bill and sent to him. He did not veto the bill. He signed it into law, and he is now saying that he is sending amendment asking the same National Assembly that have the constitutional power to insert or to work on that bill to the interest of Nigerians, that he want them to rescind their own earlier decisions. I think this is uncalled for. There are a lot of issues that the country is facing that the president needs to pay attention to. Issue of insecurity and all that. And every day he will be giving marching orders. I don't know whether they are still marching. They will be giving marching order, giving marching order, and nothing will happen. The legal document that they should decide the fiscal year is also a bone of contention. Why is the president making things look very difficult for the country? This decision, I think, is uncalled for, and he should rethink about that. Then let's see whether the National Assembly will actually, adhere to what he's asking them for. Because these are projects that have already been included in that bill, and he signed it into law. Why didn't he veto it?
But the president was grumbling while he was signing it.
And he signed it. So I think Buhari and his handlers need to work very hard. But Nigerians are taking consolation to the fact that he won't even present another budget again. So let's see what happens next.
Well, let me just put it very clear so that you understand some of these changes that FEC actually pinpointed that should be made. FEC approved that some of the changes that were made in the Appropriation Act, totaling 103 billion, should be restored. An example of this are 22 billion that was provided for sinking fund to mature bonds that will be ready for payment in 2022 in the Nigerian domestic market, and also 12 billion for counterpart funding that is required for the various rail projects, and 189 million naira to be adjusted also in the budget of the Ministry of Transport. Well, and of course, we have 5 billion naira to be restored for non-regular allowances of the Nigerian Navy. And of course, they are listless. The list is long, and let's look at this issue again critically on the side. If the National Assembly makes and legislates on an appropriation bill, and then they now say, no, what the executive gave us is not right. Let's do this. And there's something that needs to be added. We asked last time, and we still repeat it. The budget, the bill, especially the appropriation bill, is it cast in stone that at the end of the day, if it goes to the National Assembly, they cannot add, they cannot remove? And effect is insisting that they must amend the Appropriation Act in a manner that will get rid of some of those changes and insertions made by the lawmakers.
Well, I'm surprised that we are still discussing this topic because it is crystal clear. In the business of democracy, separation of power, the legislature, the parliament, is a bigger matter. However, in doing this, the parliament has to work in unison. And there is a constitutional provision for the number of people that can override the president's decision. So it is not an individual in the parliament that is bigger than the president. It is the parliament itself. Once they constitute the constitutionally required number to upturn the decision of the president. Be that as it may, let me quickly say that the president, Muhammadu Buhari, led Federal Executive Council is becoming too overconfident. And when you look at the antecedents of the 9th Assembly, you would want to understand why the president and his Federal Executive Council act the way they act. So you wouldn't blame them too much, because if you give somebody, it's a regular saying that if you give someone an inch, the person wants to take more. If you invite someone to your living room, the person wants to know what's happening in your bedroom. So if the president has made certain requests, or either through his body language or verbal demand, and the National Assembly decides to do his bidding, irrespective of how they feel themselves, then don't be surprised that the president will wake up one day and determine how or who becomes what, even in the National Assembly. Let me give you an example. The Electoral Act Amendment Bill, the National Assembly decided that they wanted a particular order of what's it called? Primary to nominate party candidates. They decided and forwarded the bill to the president. The president wrote a letter vetoing the bill with certain reasons. And they were dust. They were going to override, they will not override and all that. Eventually, they did not override. They decided to reason along with Mr. President. Not only that, what the president did not write, did not remember to put in that letter, he said it on a television station. I think it was on Channel TV, or I don't know. He said it on a television station or NT. And the lawmakers included it. What does that tell you? In his official communication, the president did not remember to put that he wanted consensus. He said it via the media, and they included it. That tells you that this night assembly takes instruction from the president. So why should we be surprised? The truth of the matter is that this night assembly has betrayed collectively betrayed the confidence Nigerians reposed
on them. Thank you very much.
They lack every capacity of a parliament except of that of the rubber stamp. But parliament, in its real sense, that the decision of a man should not, the essence of separation of power, that not just see things from his own point of view, and it becomes binding on everybody. Let's have representative of these people in these numbers. So when these people take a decision collectively, if two-thirds majority of the representative now say this is what is good, then it is assumed that it is good for everybody. But you can imagine, the wish of Mr. President is binding on 409 members. Am I correct?
Mm-hmm.
And we call them a parliament. In fact, I brought in one of my articles that President Buhari's head alone is better than 409 heads in the parliament. That's what it tells us.
Thank you very much. You have spoken well. And I see from what you've just said now, I throw it back to Isua. Because when Isua started, he started on a mood where he was visibly angry here with the executive. That this executive, what they have become, we don't know. And you said you laid credence to what he said, that they are becoming more bold, more bloody bold and daring in some of the things they do.
They're becoming autocratic.
But what you just said, B, now goes a long way to let Isua understand that the anger should not be directed at the executive. The anger should be directed at the National Assembly members. Because from what B said there, he said it is clear, very, very clear, that the National Assembly members appear to be taking instruction from the executive or from Mr. President. Because if not so, I don't see any reason why the executive arm of government will send an amendment to the appropriation bill asking the National Assembly to reverse all it had done on legislation on the Appropriation Act by removing some of those insertions. Isua, the ball is now on your court. Because what we are saying is that ordinarily what it ought to be is that the National Assembly members are representative of their constituents who are Nigerians, and they know what are immediate needs of the people for whom the budget is said to be meant for. So at the end of the day, most Nigerians say the executive arm of government can not just sit in Abuja and appropriate things that has to do with projects, both capital and anyhow you put that, and then expect that it should be executed without the National Assembly making inputs. Because as representative of the people, they are close to the people and they know the needs of the people. And then there is a link between the executive and the National Assembly. That is why you see the executive can do whatever it does.
Well,
Goes a long way to comfort the rubber stamp. Is what we are talking
well, let's see. Let's see whether they will act on the amendment that the president is talking about. If they actually act on that amendment, it means definitely that they don't know why they are there. Because the people they are seeking to protect, then they have fallen short of those powers and responsibility of protecting these people. Because this is a bill that have already been signed, and all of them in the National Assembly, over 400, all of them, yes, all of them agreed that this is what we should include, and they included it, and all of them believe it will be to the interest of Nigerians. And even from the way the presidency is talking, then you will now understand that they have no interest of funding this project. Of course, they want those projects dropped so that they will include the one have interest on. And we are moving towards 2023 election. And just like the People's Democratic Party have been raising alarm, is that the present government is looking for ways to either empower people who will fund their elections or just get a way of, getting funds to execute the 2023 election, and which is uncalled for. We keep spending millions in elections that you get leaders that can't even deliver dividend of democracy to the people. In democracy, we should not be talking about dividend, because during the military era, they construct roads, right? They built infrastructure. These are things that civilian government are calling dividend of democracy. No. Democracy, it should be about freedom of expression. It should be about protection of rights. Now the National Assembly, which is an independent body will pass a law that is acceptable by Nigerians, and the president will sign it, but later on, he will ask them to reverse what they have done.
Yeah,
It means even the president himself don't know what he is doing.
Well, thank you very much, Isua. Before we continue, I think we'll quickly take a short break. And of course, as we do that, we expect that our viewers will actually contribute constructively today to shape the conversations on the big issue. And we urge them to actually send in their comments. And of course, as they send it, we'll actually make them public for our viewers to actually watch. And then we address their own input also. Don't go offline. We'll be back in a moment.
For sponsorship and advert placements, please contact 080-3688-6158. Last Word Leadership Podcast Studio. You have the last word.
The Big Issue. Breaking down the issues that matter.
Welcome back. We are still on the big issue. And the big issue for the day is the move by President Muhammadu Buhari to reverse changes made by National Assembly in the 2022 budget. So let's come back. There's a particular clause, I think clause 11 and clause 10. The president also asked for a removal of those clauses. And one of the clauses, I think we have clause 10. Clause 10 is referring to a provision that has been made that will enable the EFCC and NFIU to be able to take 10% of whatever collections that they recover. You understand? The Minister of Finance said they are asking for that to be repealed because this is an indirect contrast to act of these two agencies, and also it is in contravention of the Fiscal Responsibility Act and Finance Act 2021. And then we have clause 11 on the other hand, which is provision that has been made that says that the Nigerian embassies and missions are now authorized by this Appropriation Act to expend funds allocated to them under capital component without the need to seek approval of the Federal Minister of Foreign Affairs. And they say this again is inconsistent with financial regulations and also inconsistent with the provisions of the Public Procurement Act. This particular clause, who was it? The National Assembly that inserted this?
I think maybe during public hearings and all that, because if you look at the anti-graft agencies, they've not been funded very well. And even the embassies and all that, there are billions or trillions of naira that the embassies are owing. You know, there were times that I did a report that the government was even planning to shut down about 80 embassies because of debt, you know, and even the Federal Ministry of Justice have been owing a lot of judgment debts. They are not paying. So maybe the members of the National Assembly include this in this very particular fiscal year so that it will help these agencies, you know, to be able to settle these debts and, you know, service their operations very well. But for the EFCC and the NFIU, I think that 10% is too much. You know, giving them 10% is like encouraging them to even go beyond legality. You know, these are not private sectors to be taking that kind of commission. They are government-funded organization, and they have a budget. Their salary come from the federal allocation. So why should they be giving 10%? For that of the embassies, well, we can look at it and say that, yes, we need to strengthen our international offices and all that, because the way you package yourself, and that's how people will look at you. Yes, if you are there internationally and you are owing money, it's uncalled for, and people will not respect you. So, but I think for that of EFCC and NFIU, yes, something need to be done on that, because they are not revenue generating agency. They are just recovering those loots for the country, and the country is paying their salaries. Their salaries is one of the highest salaries. It's unfortunate that we don't have a unified salary scheme in Nigeria, but because they don't want this anti-corruption agency staff to be lured into corruption, so they peg their salaries to be attractive. So they don't need this 10%.
Thank you very much, Isua. You heard what Isua said in this regard. You see, Isua said most of these amendments and some of these legislations, like the clause 10 and 11, would have been done at the committee level that saw the need to actually fund the embassies. And of course, knowing fully well that even the EFCC too must actually be well funded. And that was even why they inserted some of these things. Although he now had some reservations that the one for the anti-graft agency was too much.
No.
And then, from what I'm trying to say now, is that you can see that even the National Assembly in this legislation, most of their legislations are constructive and they mean well. It's not all about inserting projects, because what Nigerians will be meant to believe is that they are setting that project to favor their own areas. But we can see one day this legislation here has nothing to do with it, has to do with strengthening certain agencies of government and the embassy.
That is important.
Yes.
Now, let me start by saying that we really need this democracy to work. And there are people I refer to as gatekeepers of democracy, and these are the parliamentarians. This is the time Nigeria needs them to stamp their ground. Like I said the other time, the wish of only one man cannot override that of 469 members, representatives
Of the people.
Now, coming to the issue of EFCC, and I remember during the presentation of reports of this the appropriation bill, as that was, somebody, I think it was Honorable Chinda, or I cannot remember specifically the person who raised this issue of 10% to anti-graft agencies. But because the speaker said, for exigency of time and all that, but somebody also made a very serious point that these anti-graft agencies, knowing fully well that there is a contradiction with the acts establishing them and this provision, I would not pretend to know the source, the genesis of that 10%. Probably that is what we have to find out, who inserted or who started the tradition of 10% and why. But in fairness to the anti-graft agencies, the National Assembly or members of the National Assembly during the presentation of reports established that they have never taken that 10%. That provision has been there for some time, but the anti-graft agencies have never taken that 10%. Why they didn't expunge it is what I cannot understand. That is that for the FCC. Now, for the foreign missions, I think it is a very interesting thing. Interesting in the sense that budgetary provisions have been made for these foreign missions over the years. And from what Isua said, and from what the foreign missions have also complained, and from what some lawmakers who have traveled abroad and had first-hand information from these missions and the ambassadors and the diplomats there have gathered, they have not been well funded. I think where we should start from is to probe. We should start with a probe. Remember, an Appropriation Act is a law. It is unfortunate that we don't understand, or let me say, we have not been able to follow to the letter the provisions of these laws, and nobody has answered questions for it. I can tell you that from 1999 till date, there has not been fidelity. Let me put it that way. There has not been fidelity to the Appropriation Act, and nobody has answered any question. It is just like what you and I disobey traffic rules.
Yes.
It's not different.
You must pay for it.
An Appropriation Act is a law that the government must obey. All agencies, all parastatals of government agencies and ministries, including the president himself. So when budgetary provisions are not adhered to strictly, it is even an impeachable offense. Nobody has looked at this part of our democratic practice. That is why the executive and the Federal Executive Council will sit down comfortably and implement a part of the budget and refuse to implement the part, and nobody. But let me also say that it is not the president, it is not the members of the Federal Executive Council alone that needs money for election. Every politician, including the members of this National Assembly, they also need money for election. So I wouldn't want to dabble into issue of whose personal interest should be greater than the other. What I know is that once there is a collective decision, at least let's be practical about this. When the parliament has made a collective decision, and you don't feel, there is what they call us trading. I mean, we saw a lot of that during President Olusegun Obasanjo's administration, even during former President Goodluck Jonathan's administration. We saw a lot of that. But here, what we see is somebody handing down an instruction, and unfortunately, I don't want to be, I don't want to use derogatory words, but what we see is that some people who call our legislators, our lawmakers, they just obey instructions like high school children, high school pupils. So I think we should make this democracy work, and we should not set bad precedents. Because what we are seeing now, some other persons are watching, younger Nigerians who will become lawmakers tomorrow, younger Nigerians who will become presidents tomorrow, they are watching. And they will now refer that during the term of President Muhammadu Buhari, the president will write a letter to the National Assembly, and the National Assembly will be. So I think the leadership of the National Assembly and members of the National should choose on the side of history they want to.
Thank you very much, Billy. And let's come back. Finally, so let's look at it again. I think the crux of the whole matter, what we are saying here is about this Appropriation Act. It throws up the question: what are the powers of the National Assembly, and what are the powers of the executive in respect of the Appropriation Act? Most Nigerians have come to say that while the legislative arm of government has the right to adjust figures and make amendments to the budget, the National Assembly lacks the power to introduce new projects. Yeah, of course. Now, one will now ask, what is the oversight function of the parliament? If the likes of Professor Sage and some other Nigerians are saying that the NASS has no power to tinker with the budget in the course of legislation, that means they don't even have the power to add that no, such project should be handled. This one is useless, irrelevant. Let's expunge it. Let's add. If the National Assembly has no such power, it's over. What is now the power of the National Assembly as juxtaposed with the power of the executive?
Well, I'm confused to what they are saying, because if they said that the National Assembly don't have power to work on the budget, then the National Assembly will cease to exist. Now, President Muhammadu Buhari, if he is taking a bill, or the budget, the appropriation bill, he is laying it. He is not giving them to return to him as he's saying it. He is laying it. And if he lay it based on constitutional power of the legislators, in section 87 or so, the legislators have that power to work on it. They have that power to work on it. Remember, even before the president will bring the appropriation bill, the medium-term expenditure and the fiscal policy will have to be sent to the National Assembly for them to work on it. So it's the National Assembly that set the pace for even the president to bring the budget. So if somebody is saying that the National Assembly don't have power to work on the budget, then I don't think they are sincere with what they are saying. What they are trying to say there is that if the budget is presented to the lawmakers, that is to say, they don't have power to introduce new projects. But from all indication, these things are not new projects. You just have power to expand the scope. You understand? Just like maybe EFCC have been struggling to see how they get money to fight corruption, you understand? And the normal money put there by the executive will not be enough. And that's why they suggested the 10% and the president signed it. Then the embassies, which have been struggling to even pay rent, you understand? Now, the National Assembly, in their wisdom, provided some windows where they will get more money to settle some of this rent. And you said they don't have power. Then if you say they don't have power, you don't know what you are talking about. Because the issue is that the budget has already been prepared with the input of the National Assembly. And what the National Assembly are doing, they are not introducing new projects. They are expanding some of this scope, you understand? So that to make the budget implementable and other sectors should not suffer. So it's not about introducing new projects. And what they did, they have the legislative power to do it.
Thank you very much, Isua. Well, Nigerians are saying they're waiting. By the time that request for the amendment to their Preparation Act sent by the executive and it lands at the National Assembly, they're waiting to see what the National Assembly, the lawmakers, will do with it. Whether they will reverse themselves actually by undertaking the amendment as requested by the executive arm of government. Well, it's an unfolding issue, and of course, we'll be waiting patiently to see what the reactions of the lawmakers at the National Assembly will be. But that is the much we can take for today's edition of The Big Issue. Thank you for keeping tab with us. And of course, our in-house analysts, I must thank them very well for addressing the big issue the way it is. Join us same time on Monday for another edition of The Big Issue. Do have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you for watching. For sponsorship and advert placements, please contact 080-3688-6158. Last Word Leadership Podcast Studio. You have the last word.